be implemented or handed off to the select board and budget committee. So, Joseph, thank you for bringing that up. I would, at this point, I think we've discussed it with the planning board. Is there anyone who doesn't feel up to speed on what we talked about at the last meeting?
I read the minutes.
You read the minutes? Okay. So yeah, I think, we did a good job for the first year. I think that, we can probably improve the process in years forward with the experience that we learned this year. But I think we really have a good process in place using this format of, a Google Sheet where each department has access to their own page to input their requests, and then they get summarized kind of on the last page, which is the capital summary. And then, the capital summary, there was some magic done by Anna Bear and to, spread out a few of the larger purchases into, purchase lease proposals so that we could, instead of incurring a large cost one year, there were a few things where, like a fire truck might have been split into 3 payments, and that helps even out the annual total, which is kind of the goal of this, which is to create a fairly level, capital expenditure for each year of the plan. So this does include 6 years looking forward, and we did compare the total amount of spending for those 6 years with our current budget year, the estimate of what we've got. Since we didn't really do a CIP for last year, we did kind of a post-town meeting approval or analysis of all the capital items, and that's listed. Actually can't see it, but it's the one in purple. It's the column with the total in purple at the bottom. So that is what I have, and if there are any, I'd be happy to entertain questions from the board if anyone has them.
I'd just like to state that the select board was quite receptive to your report on our meeting on Monday the 13th, and we'd like to encourage this promising development.
Thank you, Neil. I think through the whole process, I think there was support from both the select board and the members of the budget committee that contributed.
All right.
Do you want to open it to the public?
I think it's time to open it to a public hearing. Yeah. So thank you, Phil, and all the members of the committee. So at this point, I will, in a moment, open a public hearing where we can discuss the CIP, and if you have questions, comments for us, we'd love to hear them and listen to them. And as always, just try to be specific in your questions and comments to make them most impactful and meaningful to us. And so it is currently 6:47. And I will open a public hearing for the CIP. Are there questions or comments from the public? Yes. And if you could identify yourself as well.
I'm Maggie Mumford, a resident of Plymouth and a member of the Energy Commission. And the Energy Commission did ask to be part of this process, and we didn't hear any feedback back. We were quite disappointed to be left out, understanding and appreciating all of the work that's gone into this all of the time, for sure. It does have implications, though. The recent passing of the Inflation Reduction Act means there might be a good chance for grants. Mm-hmm. However, if we're not even on the capital improvements project list, even for zero funding like the airport, and the airport has over $550,000 listed for as grants become available. If we're not even on that list, it's much harder to prove that the town is interested in this. So that is one thing that's very specific request, is that even at this late juncture, if you would consider putting on the specific project that the Energy Commission has been working on and off for 5 years on, which is for a photovoltaic array to cover the majority of electrical expenses of the municipal buildings.
And do you have an amount and an anticipated expenditure year?
That, as select board is going out on site visits
Okay.
next week
Mhm.
or the week after. And so I can tell you it would be, depending on the size of the array, it would be anywhere between 400 and 650,000,
Okay.
probably closer to the larger amount. But certainly, there are ways, just to reassure the public, there are ways to fund this
Yeah.
without capital investment. But if we can get grants, then we can lower the cost we would pay for electricity over the lifetime of the project. Mark Sturgeon would be familiar with that with the array at Holderness School. So that's the very specific. The other is as a fallback. I am realizing that, well, we could ask to become part of this project next year, part of the list next year. However, it seems to me that when you have announced this, and it's 6 years worth of projects, that anything that's already listed here has a huge leg up when it comes to town meeting. And that it might be very hard to break in as a new project as if the work hadn't existed before. And so it would seem to me that it is a distinct disadvantage in trying to get a project going. Because I realize there are costs and they're evened out over the 6 years, but these aren't all of the projects that people in the town on various commissions have been working on. And so I don't know how to resolve that. And is there a process for those left out this time around to get on the capital improvement projects next time? Is there any reassurance that it won't be a too early, oops, too late again?
Right.
Thank you.
So, June, do you want to say anything? I
Um,
mean, I can say that this is not a binding plan. There's no rule that says that if it's not on this list, it can't be funded.
Well, it's really a living document in many
It
ways.
is, it is. I mean, this should be updated. This is going to be updated every year. I would be happy to invite the Energy Committee to be part of the process next year.
So can I just add?
Sure.
So I think first of all, I'm sorry we didn't get it on there. I did have it in our mind. I have to say at the end, we were trying to meet some budget deadlines set by the select board, town manager.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of, we're already past that deadline. So we've been scrambling to go through the process, get all the information. We had a major meeting with all the department heads. I would point out that at the bottom, and Joseph's shared his screen here, so the hard copy is really difficult to read, but at the very bottom, there's a list of identified additional capital items without replacement year or cost estimate, and we do have solar array on there. So now that we have a number that you've given us tonight, we can put that in. What is not going to show up is funding over that next 6 years. But that is kind of like a wish list of things that were identified that we just either didn't have time or just couldn't proceed with yet without enough information. So we probably should have reached out to the Energy Committee. I apologize for we didn't get that done, but it is on there.
Okay. And
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
know, and I realize you
did
can't
not
read
see
it. No, I totally get it.
So, no, I'm relieved
Yeah.
that it is on there.
So we
And
can-
the cost estimate is probably better to come from Grace Garvey,
Okay.
and
Yep.
we're working with Ted Van Sant as our consultant.
And that was my sense of it, that you guys weren't necessarily ready for this coming, but, you didn't quite know yet when or where they're the costs. So it was sort of a placeholder there, along with other things that have been identified, HVAC systems or whatever, So if you have a number, this is a spreadsheet, a Google sheet, we can just drop in on, if you move over to the column, a couple columns, there's a column here for total replacement cost. If you look at
Okay.
so solar array, once we get that number from you guys, we can put it in there, and then the next year we can work on how that, whether what gets funded in year 24, 25, budget year 24, 25, 26, 27, that going
Okay,
forward.
so that's a sort of thing that then what's important to me is that we can cite being part of this when we are trying to get
Sure.
money from any kind of federal or state funding.
And, you know,
That's what's
I'd be
important to me.
happy to have the CIP committee, you know, write a letter of support if you're
Okay,
seeking grant
that-
funding, just
that's
acknowledging that, you know, the estimate, you know, we didn't have an estimate ready in time to
Right.
put on the CIP for this year, but, is the goal to bring that to town meeting this year,
The goal is to
this coming year?
bring, yes, the simple answer is yes.
Yeah.
The more complex answer is there are several different ways to fund it,
Right.
most of which have very little capital investment, one of which has a lot of capital investment. We're not trying to propose something that would raise the tax rate.
Right.
So,
So it might be that it might not even be appropriate to put on the CIP if it's not a, like, if it's a neutral expense in the operating budget because you finance it, it's not really capital. It just becomes part of the operating budget. The school does that with many things. They'll,
right.
you know, they do energy savings contracts where they get a contract from a third-party energy supplier where the work they're doing reduces the energy output, and then it just becomes a cost savings in the budget, and it's not a capital item at all. But they still expend a significant amount of money to do energy saving projects in the school, but it doesn't necessarily qualify as capital in the definition of what we would do here. So I do encourage you to, you know,
Well, there are several
Ye-
different
right.
avenues, and one of them would be no capital upfront, and
Right.
only after many years would, if we had accumulated any capital, could we then assume ownership? So there are different models. So in my opinion, and I am just one member of the commission, that it would be important to consider it for a capital investment program.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are we discussing the adoption of the CIP improvement plan?
We will be this evening. First, we're going to hear from the public right now.
Okay.
And then we'll reconvene as a board and discuss. Are there any further comments or questions from the public about the CIP? No? Okay. So it is currently 6:56, and I will close the public hearing on the CIP program, or the CIP. And bring it back to the board. And is there, Neil, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we include a representative from the Energy Commission and the Conservation Commission. They both have, well, I won't say anything about it. That's my motion.
Do we
Are
need
you
a
talking
motion for
about
that?
for this plan or for next year when we do this next year?
Well, I guess we're at the point where we're kind of over a hurdle. We have town meeting coming up.
Right.
Is there any way that they can be brought in?
I'm not sure this requires a motion.
Well, no, I gave you my motion.
Yeah, okay.
I think it would take significant,
Is there a second?
oh,
Oh, Bill, would
the
you
only
like to
thing I'd
respond?
like to discuss is I think we're at a point, I think the budget committee and the select board are looking forward to using this in the preparation of the budget for the upcoming year.
No.
And I don't think that not having a project on here prohibits the selectmen from considering including that. You know, if
Okay.
there's a special project from the Conservation Commission or Energy Commission.
Can I modify my motion? And
Yeah.
include the Energy Commission and the Conservation Commission in the next round to be represented on the CIP committee.
So I guess I would wonder if we need them to be on the committee or just include, because the CIP represents a number of different departments, and I think we could consider the Conservation Commission and the Energy Commission kind of a department, and they don't necessarily need to be on the committee so much as they need to be asked to, they need
Represented in
their
the
own
plan.
tab on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So. It's not that they can't be on the committee, but
I think that would be a great question for this board to consider when a CIP committee is considered maybe next spring after town meeting.
And in some ways, in terms of funding, right, like, the CIP is a guideline
It is.
for the select board and then ultimately the voters, and it's not really fully like set in stone binding.
It's not binding.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
I don't
for
have a
example,
second,
the
so-
police chief had a proposal the other night to buy a truck and get rid of a couple of used vehicles that the select board approved.
Mhm.
You know, that wasn't on the CIP, and, you know, there are gonna be exceptions. And I think that the town is smart to.
We're discussing the
Okay, sorry.
motion. We haven't got
I'm
a
sorry.
second, so.
Is there a second?
Can I clarify a question? Are you asking, is the motion to include?
Well, I don't have a second for my motion, so we can't really discuss it.
I was just asking for clarification on what, on,
I think you can ask for clarification.
yeah, I'm just looking for clarification on it. Is the motion to include information from the CIP and the Conservation Commission in this CIP for this year? Or are you asking to include them in the committee for next year?
It appears that you are not, you're at a point where you can't take them in this year, and you're not willing to.
Well,
So if you're, if it's acceptable to include them in the process for the next round, that's what my motion is.
I'd second including them in the next round.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second then?
Can I just ask a question just real quick,
Yeah.
Jim? So you mentioned the Conservation Committee, and I don't know if they looked to submit anything kind of down on the kind of wish list end of it. Were there other people or other groups that,
No, not that I'm aware of, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, there's always, I think the more you do this, people start to realize, oh, well, this should be on there, and this should, so it's sort of this inventory that starts to snowball a bit because, you know, one department, for instance, put phone system on there. So another department's like, oh, I should put the phone system on my department.
Sure.
Oh, and then I should. Somebody else has got a roof repair on one building, and maybe we need a roof repair on this building, but we never thought of it, you know? So we kind of put that kind of stuff, like HVAC, for all town buildings without, but in some departments, they know they've got a repair coming up. You know, I can't remember exactly where. So that's where I think what we are trying to do on that wish list was some things like parking garage in downtown. It keeps coming up. So we got a rough ballpark number of $2.5 million for a parking garage. So to just show that it's on there, we're thinking about it. It's not funded for the next 6 years, but it's kind of there. You know, the select board recently, I don't know, a month or two ago, asked more about Railroad Square area and this desire to kind of redevelop down there, and how can we, so we put that on there, but there's no number yet or time. So it's kind of a placeholder. It's sort of just some thoughts. Going back to the specific comment tonight, my suggestion, because this is a spreadsheet, I think this will work if I just hit enter. Like, does that pop up now? I just put as a placeholder $500,000 on there. So you could, I can also just delete it, you know, like that. So you could tonight,
Right.
there are lots of things on here actually, but, but it saves it. Sorry, I'm not trying to, it's been a long day. So when we have more information like that, I think that's perfectly acceptable to just add. It's a living document, basically. It's a program, it's not a budget. So the more we can get input is fantastic. If the Conservation Commission has something and a number and a project, then we can add it in there. I think,
was just asking if
yeah.
there was really anyone else that
not that I'm
had
aware of, you know, but
reached
did we
out.
reach out to absolutely everybody? No. Well, you know,
And our
this is
goal
the first time in a long
to do a better
year.
job of that this, you know, this,
Yeah.
next time this
This
happens.
is
I
the
think
most comprehensive list the town's had probably ever. There, you know, in my opinion, from
Mhm.
looking back, the last time it was done was probably up until maybe 2005-ish or so. So it really hasn't, I mean, Kathy, this town manager, has done some, but it's not this comprehensive. So my suggestion might be is if you wanted to adopt as presented with that one change of what I just did
Adding
there.
a placeholder of $500,000
Yeah,
for a
it doesn't
PD
affect
array.
the annual 6 years so far, but it
Right.
helps show for the Energy Commission for grant purposes, a number and a thought, that it's
Mhm.
there. I mean, she said 450 to 600, I think, so is 500 enough? I mean,
400 to 650, I
We can
think,
put, or
was my note.
400 to 650, so we could put 650 or,
So,
Sure.
what,
We-
650? Okay. Okay, we can change it to 650.
we
Give
have
me a
a
number.
special comment from Zach, but before then, I wanted to just quickly say also, my one concern here is that, this does fall under the auspices of the planning board.
It does.
But we've also put our trust into a particular group of individuals on the CIP committee,
Mhm.
and this is not a CIP meeting.
Right.
And I'm not sure, as a member of the planning board, even though I agree with including these things, feel comfortable binding a group that we've given jurisdiction over this to tell
Right.
them they have to do this, even though I think it's probably a good idea.
I think ultimately the responsibility for this lies with the planning board, and this board authorized the subcommittee.
Yes.
And the subcommittee did a great amount of work, and there are gonna be no modifications nobody's discussed modifications yet to the hard part, which is getting to the cells in green. So, I think there are a couple footnotes on the bottom left, and I don't think it would be a material change to put a placeholder of $650,000 for a PD array in there. And for that matter, if there was a Conservation Commission project that you know of that had a value, we could put that as well.
The Conservation Commission has a large-scale project involving grants and funding,
Uh-huh.
and it also has multiple smaller projects which require funding, and I feel very strongly that they need to be included
Okay.
in the process.
Zach, did you have a comment you wanted to share? Yes.
I spent all Monday night encouraging people to do that. So a couple of just.
Can you
quick
identify yourself, sir?
Zach Trout.
Thank you.
CIP subcommittee member and chair of the select board. A couple things that have come up just in the past week. We, as Phil mentioned, on Monday we approved the purchase of a new vehicle that wasn't in the inventory at all for the police department. We missed it, right, when we did the inventory. We're probably looking at new voting machines from the town clerk's office. The town clerk didn't make it onto the CIP plan. We approved a subcommittee on Monday to start looking at costs around a new fire station. Probably not for this year, probably a few years out. As that subcommittee works, they're gonna get prices. There's no price on a fire station in this plan. I think that the point that June made about this being a living document is a really good one. The piece that is, and none of it's set in stone because it's a tool, but the piece in my mind that's the most to be respected is the years, where we've taken something, we said, we think we're going to fund this in this year. That piece feels like we shouldn't maybe willy-nilly change those numbers. That's for the CIP committee to do on an annual basis. But adding things that we realize we missed, adding to the bottom, adding new pieces of equipment we forgot about, updating things that maybe the board did purchase that wasn't planned. I think those kinds of changes should get kind of rolled into the dock as they happen, but we should be careful about the pieces where we say, this is the year we intend to do the thing.
Right.
Just my 2 cents of how I
And-
think the tool might
Yeah.
work best for.
And I would like to make a blanket statement that if any town departments feel like they were left out, please reach out to us as a committee, and we will do our best to include that information next year when we begin this process again.
So we still have a motion and a second on the table
Yes, we do.
to include the Energy
Conservation.
Commission and Conservation Commission on the CIP for next year. And is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion is approved to include the Energy and Conservation Commissions on the CIP for next year.
So, are we good for me to just comment about something?
You may, yes.
Okay, thank you. I think it's, since we have a number, we have the solar array already on there, I think that's great for this evening to throw it on there, but I do think we could be here all night or, all week, just thinking about all the things we missed and just appreciate this as a living document and that this was kind of the first crack at it and, since before our last site plan review regulations were last changed, so it's been a while, it's been, 17 years or so. And I think there's always room for improvement, but I think this is a pretty substantial undertaking, and I think that it can only get better from here.
Well said, thank you. So, we do have to decide whether or not we want to adopt the CIP tonight. Is there further discussion or any motions?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the CIP this evening.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to adopt the CIP. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the CIP is adopted. Thank you all. And thanks to the committee especially.
And thanks, Phil, for being in charge.
Well,
And you want the 650 in there, I just realized, from their solar array.
why don't we put a note on it that it was, let's leave it as is, because it's not in the, we don't have a date.
Adopted that version.
You versioned the document already,
Yeah,
so
so-
you have
Right.
a stamp for when it was.
Yeah.
Right,
So now
that's
you can
fine,
modify it.
right.
But that was the one that was up when you made the motion, so I guess that's what it was.
I intended to make the motion with that.
Okay.
I would actually
but I didn't
suggest that
articulate
if the town still has access to this, I mean, we may come across things that we forgot to include, and we should probably put a line at the bottom and just add notes that
Yeah.
said,
Which in essence-
next year, add these things. So, that way we'll have notes of that.
All right, well, that concludes our public hearings. Other business from members of the board and planning staff. First up, there is a continuation of our zoning amendment discussion from 7.7 and 9.1. And I believe these are all potential amendments to the zoning ordinance that we've seen and discussed before. I think we've gotten a little bit of new language, perhaps, from staff about a few of these. Before we just kind of dig into these, are there any general comments, June or Joseph, about where we stand now as opposed to 2 weeks ago?
You want to go?
Yeah, I mean, we have, as we have talked about this with the board and tried to, the board has continued to discuss this and articulate what direction we want to go with these different items. We started looking at how this will actually fit into the zoning ordinance, what an actual amendment would look like. So on the table up front, we have a couple of more specific examples than we've had thus far. An example of the chicken discussion, we've come up with something more formalized. We took some of the templates we've discussed and then sort of refined that a little bit. How would it fit into our ordinance? Same with the removal of the accessory family dwelling unit, the setback changes that we talked about in single-family and multifamily residential. Those we have a draft in front of you. The village commercial zone, height and setback discussion.
Just to slow you down for a second, right? In the village commercial, village commercial. Oh, okay, yeah, I was thinking the other setback change, never mind.
Yeah, we have both of them, but they're sort of on separate handouts for you. So the village commercial height and setback are lumped together on this. With that one, should note it's kind of actually 3 now, based on our discussion of last time. There's the height change, there's the front and rear setback discussion, and then there's also the discussion at the very bottom of establishing a maximum front setback, which was new of last meeting. So we have just thrown in a draft of how that would also fit within the whole totality of the ordinance. And then the last one is the variance criteria, which, we just essentially pulled directly from state statute at this point, and it's, that language is pretty much should be in line with the state statute, and the proposed language is, their criteria, as well as the criteria about, variance or hardship in the case of a person with a physical disability. So those are sort of the differences between our last discussion. We've tried to take it, make it into a, from an idea of how we want it to look into what it would actually look like in the context of the ordinance.
I think one of the things we also was slightly different here from what we talked about last time was not including the special exception for 10 feet setback in the single-family and multifamily residential. And I believe there's some pretty good reasoning for that.
Yeah, that was one we had talked about here.
Yeah.
In the board, had sort of indicated in their desire to move forward with that it makes sense to maybe not have that special exception. The difference between, a 10-foot and a 15-foot is not great. And we've sort of looked as well around the single-family, multifamily district, and, there is a little bit of variability. So, the point is taken if you have a line of houses where the average setback's around 12, a 15 versus a 10, the character of the neighborhood will still be preserved in that case. So we thought it was an easier to implement change.
And it keeps us from having to write special exception guidelines. And
Right, yeah, it was easier to administer. It's
Sorry.
kind of-
I'm getting a little confused here.
Yeah,
We've
we
kind
are too.
of breezing through all of these, and now we're getting a little.
So should we slow down and
Yeah,
like,
just go through
talk
them one
about
by
one at a
one,
time
yeah.
for a
Go through them
moment?
one by one, that would be more
Yeah.
helpful for
You
me,
wanna-
because I'm a little lost.
You want to talk about that one, the front setback and?
sure,
since
so the
we're on
front,
it?
the front setback in the single and multifamily residential.
So you should have a handout that says that on the top.
I don't even know.
Can
Somewhere.
we just, so.
Oh, this one
I'm
right here.
looking
yeah.
at this
Right in front of
zoning map, which is old, but how far up does the single-family residential go?
Up, meaning,
I mean, far up, how far south?
It
Or
doesn't,
what are its boundaries?
yes,
yeah, it includes the Thurlow Street area as
So
well.
like all the way up to like Sunrise Circle and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's right about the end. The zoning map isn't exactly accurate on the tax maps, but it's kind of, you can see the single family zone accurately in there. So yes, it does include areas outside of the prime village district, but the vast majority of housing in it is in the village district.
So I guess my concern about, am I good to just jump in?
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Is setting the front setback to 15 is, I feel like that makes sense in the historic neighborhoods, but as you get further into the more modern developments, in some places, the 15 might just, I mean, it's gonna behave a little bit more like the ag zone almost in how it's laid out, so 15 might be a little.
It's interesting, a lot of those areas are being pretty quickly filled in with denser development. And I mean, I personally wouldn't be against the 15 there, but I see what you're saying. But I also see a lot of development happening in some of those places that make it denser and denser, where 15 increasingly does seem appropriate, even though maybe it didn't like 5-10 years ago.
And this is minimum. People can go deeper if they
Yeah.
want.
Right, I guess I'm just wondering about, we talk about neighborhoods and, if all of a sudden we've got houses that have 30 and then houses that have 15. It's something we've talked about a lot. I'm just wondering, does it make sense to change it everywhere? I mean, we can't necessarily change it in the single family without changing it
Right.
everywhere unless we're adding something about like the, average of the street or something
Yeah.
like that. I'm just bringing it up because I just think.
And it's not really for the planning board necessarily to take it into account, I suppose, but, a lot of those new neighborhoods may well have covenants too. It's another consideration where if they have special criteria, I mean, again, obviously the board doesn't govern that, but that could be a factor if someone was building a new neighborhood and didn't want, a closer setback.
Any other thoughts about that question?
my only other thought, because I think you've got a good point that we probably didn't look, we got kind of hyper-focused on the in-town area. So maybe the solution is 30 and then go to 15 by special exception.
Because I'm pretty sure in our neighborhood, which I am kind of in the neighborhood of all the examples you
Yeah.
used, you couldn't really build a house with a 30-foot.
Exactly, yeah.
You know,
You'd be on someone else's property.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, the other option would be, say, in an area like north of Texas Hill or something, you know, but then that kind of isn't pickup
Maybe where there's
Ash Hill or
town
something.
water and sewer, you could have a 15-foot setback by default, and where there's well and septic, it would be 30. You could drive
I
it.
mean, I wonder
It's
if,
sewer partly up Thurlow, I think, so.
Well, they gotta have
The sewer
larger
well up
lots
there.
if you're gonna have on-site well and septic.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, because it is in the single family, you can have, 1 acre minimum
Yeah.
if you're, or no, half acre minimum
Yeah.
if you're on water, on sewer.
which is still bigger than most of the properties.
Yeah, I think our house is 0.19 acres.
I think a cleaner way to go would be 15 by special, keep it at 30 and then say 15 by special exception, and then have some criteria being availability of water and sewer, character of the neighborhood.
I wonder
light on
though,
the street.
I wonder, let's say we're talking about some of those other areas with a minimum of 15, a lot of people are gonna build deeper. And if someone does build at 15, is that a hardship for their neighbors or a disturbance of any sort or a problem to push the character a little bit, or is it not? I mean, I'm not certain it is.
So I guess maybe let's just talk about what's the reason behind a 30-foot setback at all.
I think it's an arbitrary standard. I really do, and I think the examples cited here, the average setback on Keble Street is 12, Pleasant Street between Avery and Langdon is 16, and the average on Broadway is 26. So, my awareness of Broadway being 26, like, I certainly don't feel like that's encroaching in that particular neighborhood. It might not feel the same if you were going up Langdon. The hill. But yeah, I mean, our single family residential, I'm actually wondering if the downtown area of single family should be different than some of the more remote areas,
Like a different zone.
maybe, yeah.
Well, that's a different discussion.
Well, I know.
I'm,
That before.
yeah. Oh. You had a- okay.
That's,
That was not a motion.
Basically, whatever it took down just 30 foot was really because downtown was kind of pretty heavily developed already, right?
Yeah.
And so how much more building were you gonna do here, whereas everything outside of that, there was a lot of open lots probably when that was put in, and that makes sense to me, but, so I think that opens it up to the question of is there two zones or something, but,
That's a good point.
As a lot of like space gets filled in, I think it is getting denser in a lot of those other parts of single-family residential that used to be more sparse. And
To be honest, there's a newer home on Pleasant Street that's actually built, I think it's a 30-foot setback, and it sticks out like a sore thumb because it's too far back.
Yeah.
It really is
Yeah.
bizarre.
I mean, I'm okay with 15 and let people use their judgment. Personally.
I would think that most people would want to have more setback, but they're limited by the size of their lot
Mhm.
and the side and rear setbacks. And a lot of the smaller lots are pre-zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people might might want to go less. Maybe they'll get a shorter driveway with a, shorter setback. So I guess I'm not ready to, without really thinking about this a little further, to make a determination on this, just because I want to sort of visualize what it's going to look like, and will
Drive
that,
around a bit.
I mean, with an eye towards this, but
Yeah.
I mean, will it change neighborhoods if all of a sudden, the character of a neighborhood? Because I think the 30-foot setback is a lot about preserving the, rural character of the town of Plymouth. And, if all of a sudden, like you notice that on Pleasant Street, and I feel I know which house you're talking about. I mean, it doesn't matter. Will all of a sudden, if you've got a house that's half as far from the road, is that gonna change a seemingly, suburban / rural neighborhood up on Thurlow Street, or even, further out into whatever that roundabout area is up off of.
Up Thurlow area?
No, I'm thinking off of, Hilltop,
Oh.
that,
Oh, Ash Hill, cross
yeah,
country.
that area
And I
too.
can point out Ski Lift Lane, I mean, there's a couple
Right.
house lots that aren't built yet, where if someone can put in 15 feet, they will, because it's
a big drop.
ski lift, it's a ski drop,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Literally, there's a lot more engineering, a lot more fill to go
Yeah.
on there. So I don't know, is it gonna really crush the neighborhood appearance? It definitely looked funny having a house 15 feet from the road there, but I don't, it's a tough call, really. Most of them aren't, I know they just built a brand new one, it's probably like 25-ish, two of them, something like that.
Mm.
I think they're still set back quite a ways.
They should be 30.
Yeah.
Measuring tape.
Yeah.
Why don't we keep looking at it?
Okay.
I think that's a good suggestion. I think I'd like to consider how we might do 15 by special exception, because I think that's a easier fix than then have some criteria that are about the possibly slope, proximity, that kind of thing, the general layout of the street, other houses on either side, Because the other thing is, if we go to 15, it does, and somebody's got 30, then they can put a garage like right in front, which would look, so there's also that part that we're kind of just thinking empty lots, new houses, like the one on, fairly new and Pleasant. But what if somebody put a garage like halfway in between there? That would be even
Yeah.
more weird, going up, so I think we can, it's not perfect, or we can just leave it at 30. And then, but I just feel like in town there we know we have a couple lots. We've had questions about infill on a few vacant lots in town, and the 30 is really a deterrent to having those used, and they have water and sewer, so it's a way to encourage those to be reused and, or have something happen, so, and not have it look odd.
I like the idea of 15 feet as a special exception.
With the idea being, the main thing being kind of what's the
Character of the neighborhood.
character of the neighborhood, what are the other houses on the street like, and it'd be for primary kind of structures, Does that make sense? Makes it a little harder. I know it's more and more criteria,
Yeah.
but we can think about that. I think it's a good way to go.
I don't think more criteria are necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's more pages in our binder, but I think it gives more direction. It gives the zoning board more direction
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So while we're talking about setbacks, should we talk about the
Village commercial.
village commercial? And I think we were all in agreement that a 0 minimum was a good idea, unless anybody's changed their mind about that. I think the question then becomes the maximum setback. And I think last time we spoke, there was some question about how that would be put into the zoning ordinance. And so are there updates on that you want to explain, or is it just, it's okay to have a maximum, and what is the, I mean,
Yeah, there's only a maximum listed for this village commercial. Yeah, that one. So the,
So yes, there is a, poor Joseph's writing away here, not trying to write and talk. There was a late breaking development this morning when I came charging in the office saying, I took another look at Main Street. So we actually, I can't share my screen. Do you want to take the map? Do you have the tax map? So I started realizing that like in front of Chase Street Market, the area where the tables are, that's on their property, because that building is set back actually somewhere 7-8 feet from the back side. You don't notice it because it's all one level of pavement, right up to the building, but they own a little bit of space in front, and that allows them to have the tables out there. So the one area where that probably there really is a 0 setback is from Hong Kong to what's now Yama's, that stretch there. For the most, by Rand's, for the most part has a 0, but I think Rand's actually, I forgot to look at that one, is sort of set back because they put snow blowers and lawnmowers. So they have a little display area that's maybe 2-3 feet wide or something. There's a couple other exceptions where Fat Fishes maybe, but they actually have a little bit of area for some outdoor dining there.
M&M Scoops
And then the
has
Lucky Dog
tables.
is right on the property line. But if you actually look at it from Chase Street north, there's most of the properties are at least 5 foot back, and some a little bit more. So it widens out the perception of pedestrians going through there. It gives the feel of a wider sidewalk, and/or it allows for some outdoor seating display. It's easier for the building owner to maintain. So, and it could give a little landscaping like Meredith Village Savings Bank has done in front of theirs. So we just started thinking about it. So what we came up with this morning after combing the map. Yeah, so you can kind of see, if we zoom in on, like, but you can probably visualize what I'm saying. So what if we went what we started to think about was a minimum of 5 feet, but you could go to 0 by special exception.
Mhm.
And then we also decided that a maximum was a good idea, to say you can't go more than 10 feet in. Again, if somebody was to redevelop a lot that may be underutilized, and wanted to put a new building in, not utilizing an existing footprint, all those sort of things, by not letting them go more than 10 feet back means that you can't get parking in the front.
Yep.
All right, so parking would have to go out back. So that's consistent with the master plan goal of trying to have pedestrian-friendly downtown area. Because you can't really fit parking in
No.
a 10-foot to head in, and then you can't back out like they do in front of ladders, which is so dangerous, that wide curb cut. So if that, to me, is one of the primary goals of the area, while we want to make sure businesses can have some parking, I get that, you can't have it in a way that's unsafe to pedestrians, so minimizing the curb cut width. And one way to do that is just make you can build between 5 and 10 feet from the property line. You could go closer by special exception, but the maximum you could go back would be 10.
Could we put?
I think it's, again, think about that this isn't ready for, and need walk around. We can do another walk. I don't know, days are getting shorter.
Rebecca?
No, I think, I can think of, I hadn't thought about the parking thing,
Yeah.
because I think that's definitely something that is really important, but can we think of ways where there might be, if we were to redevelop a piece of property, or there was some redevelopment happening in the Village Commercial District, where we'd want, something where there's something in the front, could we allow for that by special exception with another set of criteria that just disallows
I was mulling this over in my head as they were speaking as
parking
well.
in the front? Does that make sense?
What, did it allow parking in the front, or?
No, it did not.
Did not allow parking.
Sorry. Does
Wait.
not allow parking in the front.
Like criteria that said, not just you can't do this, but we're promoting like dining space or something directly related to the.
Garden
Yeah.
with,
The sports
Dining's
bar on South Main Street,
yeah.
isn't that built right on the line, on the front?
The Panther Pub?
Yeah.
We'd have to look, yeah.
They have like an enclosed,
It's next to the laundry.
formerly
You're
open
saying-
area or something there,
Out the window.
is that right?
But we're saying, 0 is by special exception for the front
Yeah.
setback?
I mean, this is kind of what I was thinking as well. I mean, part of the benefit is preventing the parking from happening there.
Mm-hmm.
The other benefit is by leaving that space, you're also encouraging uses that are enticing to pedestrians, like the seating, like small displays, and things that really kind of lure pedestrians to a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
I guess yeah.
The question is, do they need more than 10 feet for any of these things? Or is just leaving it at 10 feet, nice and simple, the answer? I can imagine a restaurant with more outdoor seating in the front that's more than 10 feet, or something like that.
Where are they gonna park?
But that just might be, at that point, a variance anyway, because maybe we don't want to encourage that. I'm not sure.
I guess I'm just trying to think of things that could utilize that space in the front that's not parking, that would be fit within the
Yeah.
character of the Village Commercial.
mean, I think in general, you don't want to start pushing it too far back, though, and having too wide of a space for it, whatever activity that would be.
And always keep in mind that say somebody wanted to do something and they're talking about outdoor seating and kind of it all looks good, that's for that use. And the building's more permanent potentially than the use. So the building could get a new tenant or be sold, have a different type of thing in it, a use, so.
And if they get like 20 feet of outdoor seating, that's 3 months of outdoor seating and then 9 months of a big, wide, empty space, as
Dumpster
opposed to just like 9 months of a narrower, extended sidewalk.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure we're not eliminating, just like zoning some neat
Yeah.
thing out without.
Well, if it's really neat and unique, there's always, I know it's difficult, there's always a variance.
I don't know if a variance really will go for something, you could get a
That's
variance.
not a hardship,
for-
it's not really a hardship.
Yeah.
I didn't want to like repeat that line, but like occasionally.
The sports bar must have gotten a variance to expand the front of their building
Yeah.
right out to the very line.
Yeah,
I
I
think-
don't know how that happened.
We'd
Did
have
they,
to
I
look
think they
at-
may
I
have
don't- I
enclosed
don't
something that already existed there.
Yeah.
I think, was it,
Maybe, I don't know.
no?
Oh, the front part
Was
of
it
the
brand
building
new
was like a porch or something. It's
Was it brand,
constructed.
yeah, I'm not sure.
I
was
feel like it's the
brand new.
same line as where the door is. I feel like it's just,
Yeah.
I think something was closed in, I can't remember at this point.
Joe is still here, he might
I
remember.
don't have that much
He's part
history
of
in
the
that
discussion.
building.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm okay with just staying personally with the 0 minimum, 10 by special exception. A lot of people, 10 max, not 10 by special exception. So a lot of people will probably go for like 5 or 8 or something, and that's fine.
So 5 minimum or 0 minimum?
0 minimum? Maybe nobody goes for it, but if they do, I don't see a real problem with that. I don't know, what do we all think? And if we think of any like reasons to have more than 10, maybe we can talk about that, but next time or something.
So you're saying 0 minimum for the,
0 minimum, which maybe a lot of people won't take, as long as there's a 10 max. Maybe a lot of people would take 5 or 10,
yeah,
which still wouldn't allow for the parking, but will allow a little extra breathing room for whatever else they wanted to do. Lay of flowers or tables or.
Are the sidewalks in the right of way? Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm okay with 0 minimum.
10 max?
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, there's still, yes. I like 0, 10, 0 minimum, 10 max. It does encumber any, a 10-foot maximum is a new precedent for the zoning ordinance.
yeah.
But I don't think it's out of character for Main Street, for the village
Preserving
commercial.
character in many ways for Main
Yeah,
Street.
I agree.
I mean, mostly what we're talking about is if a building's getting replaced. It's,
Mhm.
it's not really, we're not really talking about, for the most part, except for maybe in some of the, well, there's no frontage in the back, but we're mostly talking about new development, or redevelopment of, so.
But there are areas where somebody could add on, like the Chase Street Market, they could take that outdoor seating and enclose it, or make it into a porch then.
Mhm.
Extend the
Yeah, no, I
structure,
see what you're saying, yeah.
That'd be interesting.
I still think it needs more thought that,
Yeah.
kind of think about, that's why I was saying a 5-foot is as a 5-foot minimum, 0 by special exception, and then a 10-foot max was sort of discouraging between 0 and 5.
Although getting complicated, but,
Yeah.
I don't mind 0 and 10.
what's that?
I don't mind 0 and 10.
Okay.
Keeps it simple enough, easier to
Yeah.
implement.
So that's without special exception.
No special exceptions, 0 min, 10 max.
And then as far as the rear, do we still like 0 as just a 0 minimum setback, and as opposed to the current, which is 10 and 0 by special exception?
I haven't thought that one through as thoroughly. I don't, off the top of my head, see a problem with that, but
Are there any examples where?
Have
we
you gone
kind of-
around looking at like where buildings
Zero.
are related to their lot lines and stuff, or?
I know, it
All over the
takes
place.
some detail to look at the tax map and see where buildings are and, you know, what potential implications there might be.
Can we sit with this for a little bit?
Yeah, I'd like to as well.
Because I feel like I can't imagine what 5 feet looks like unless, you know,
Right.
measuring myself and, yeah, so I need
Start
to.
laying down along Main Street.
So when you see me doing that, you'll know what's going on.
A little wider than this table.
But I just wouldn't mind, you know, thinking about this as I walk around town and get a sense for this, because, you know, just imagining what would happen if one building bumps out closer to the, you know, imagining them bumping out when everyone else is, you know, at a certain setback and,
And
yeah.
some of that happens already in minor ways.
We could, if you want to have us print out some kind of versions of this, you know, so you could walk around with sort of the tax map or have it, you know, because where the sidewalk, the backside of the sidewalk isn't always
Yeah.
clear. You know, it's not like there's a line down the road saying that this is the sidewalk in the right of way and this is the private property, you know.
Can we spray paint it?
I was gonna say, it would be fun to.
You know what I mean? So if
We
you
could chalk
had
it out,
that.
we could chalk it out for a day and then like,
Yeah.
it's off.
No.
So I just, you know, just keep in mind that's what sort of struck me this morning, is like Chase Street, wait a second, Chase Street Market actually is set back. Sort of my first thought, you know.
If it's easy to print out that, so
Yeah.
we could see, that would be helpful for me.
Yeah.
Give me an excuse to maybe go get more coffee sometime.
No real reason.
Is there a need for an excuse?
I mean, I can make lots of excuses.
We have some very patient attendees in our audience that I'm sure would like to talk about
Yes.
chickens
I
as well.
I was just thinking about that. I mean, just before we get to the chickens, accessory family dwelling, that can just get checked off, right? This is just an administrative
get rid of it.
change and done.
That's great.
So chickens, update standards for chickens in single-family residential. We had a discussion about this recently at our last meeting or 2 meetings ago, and we looked at some other ordinances from around the region, and that I think Joseph pulled up, and I think some of them went into complicated metrics about what's the size of your property, how many chickens does that mean for you, and it seemed like it was starting to get too complicated for enforcement. And so we talked about different numbers of chickens. I think we all agreed to not have male animals for the issues they cause.
Poultry, male poultry.
Yes, thank you. Yes, male chickens in particular. We're only talking about chickens, not even.
We're not even talking
broad-
about
more
other
broadly
poultry,
poultry. Yeah.
specifically chickens.
Chickens.
I don't think anyone wants female ducks in
Yeah.
some of the.
Guinea fowl.
And we came up with the number 10 for a max number of hens. And
It's a place to start the discussion. right?
Yeah.
Is 10 too many?
I've had some anecdotal discussions where I said, 10?
So, sir, can I get some clarity? Is this for across the town?
No, this is in residential neighborhoods.
Oh, because they're already defined.
single
they're
and
already
multi-
defined in ag.
Yeah. It's just single
This is-
family.
This is kind of a basis on, you know, we looked at how it would fit in the zoning, and one way it could fit is by saying that the residents of a single-family dwelling may have chickens as an accessory use to a single-family dwelling. So it would apply to single-family dwellings in town, anywhere.
This is across, anywhere, okay.
This, as it's written right now, would
Was it
apply.
single-family dwellings or just in the single-family residential zone?
This is, yeah, accessory,
Well, agriculture's already allowed.
right, in the
It's
ag
an
zone.
agricultural use, so in the ag zone, you can do them already. It's
Yeah.
just
Okay.
a single family where they're not.
Okay, I guess
Yeah, yeah, sorry, I think we forgot that part. It
We
should
talked
be in
about that
just the
last time.
single-family residential zone.
Zone, not,
Okay.
yeah.
So someone who lives in
So
the
we-
ag zone on
we
30
would need to
acres can have
add a definite-
free-ranging runner ducks if they want.
And someone who has a single-family house in the multifamily
have a
zone
And they can have
is
roosters.
out.
Yeah.
Bobcats and fisher cats,
Yeah.
too.
20 roosters.
Yeah. 15 geese.
So before we open it up for any potential comments from the public, are there any further questions or comments from the board?
I do like that it does specify that no slaughtering is.
Yes.
There was a time when I could look out my window and see, like right in the single-family residential, you're
Yep.
like, oh, there's chickens being killed right there. Less noisy than the college parties that are in that house now.
Did you get the note, by the way, from the
I
students?
don't know how I feel about on-site slaughtering of chickens is prohibited.
I
I
mean,
think we should keep it a little weird.
yeah. And then the bear came back and got the rest of them, so, yeah.
Perhaps this is a good time to open up to the public. Does the public have any comments about June?
We do have public comments at the end. I just want
Oh,
another
okay.
meeting. So I guess last year we dealt out a lot of public comments
I was
during
gonna,
along, but we had, I know we had one person here. So I just want to remind the board, though, that last year we had lots of public comments as you worked this stuff out. And personally, I feel like, then when we actually had the official public hearing, like in December, we had other people show up to speak at the public hearing in support of changes that you'd kind of abandoned, So I just want to, I think we have somebody here that wants to, I think that's fine, but just remember that the official public hearing would come, we haven't noticed that, it would come later, so we don't want to necessarily, we want to make sure that anybody listening or watching knows that it's not the official public hearing, if you're
Yes.
taking comments now. I
And
just want
I
to
was
caution you on that.
I was going to preface
Okay,
my
sorry.
allow of the comments right now to say what we're really doing is fact-finding, and we're looking for experiences about the situation on the ground rather than specific comments about proposals that are still very much in motion. So we're really looking for just kind of facts about what's going on right now that might help us understand the situation that we're responding to. Did you have any comments?
Just a question there.
Did you want to identify yourself to the
I'm sorry.
board and?
Don Smilak, resident of Plymouth, up on Broadway. You were alluding to chickens mostly all the time. But what happens if they wanted turkeys?
What we were,
So you're saying fowl.
yeah. What we were talking about at our last meeting was to just say chickens are allowed and not any other fowl.
At least in
Do
this-
you have any experiences that might add to this discussion about that?
Oh, we only have the chickens,
Okay.
chickens and the roosters.
Would it be sufficient to prohibit roosters in the single family? Would that address your concerns?
That would be the most of it, yes.
Okay.
But then the number of chickens is a concern also, because then you have the manure
Mhm.
and the disposal of that. Because if you leave it on the back line, when it rains, that could
Yeah.
go into somebody else's property.
And we were talking a little bit about setbacks last time, I think, for the chickens. And I don't believe we actually stuck to them in the end. Is that right?
Well, if they have to be in some sort of structure,
Thank you.
then they can, the structure has to adhere to the setbacks, right?
Yeah.
It would be an accessory structure.
And this language does say no more than 3 cubic feet of manure shall be stored, but it doesn't have the language we originally had about, that was in the Concord example, I should say, about specific setbacks for the different components. But it does limit the manure to 3 cubic feet.
You measuring that, Zach?
3 cubic feet
Well, it should be covered by a fully enclosed structure or container is the other part of that.
Well, 3 cubic feet it's only a third of a yard. No, it's smaller even. It's a ninth of a yard. It's not a very big volume. 3 cubic feet,
But still. Did
3
you
by
have,
1 by
oh,
1.
sorry.
It's not that big.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah.
Patty Mumford again. My husband has chickens. We live together, but my husband has chickens. So although it makes it more complicated, I definitely think the size of the lot is a major factor. And also, it's hard to keep a few chickens alive in the winter. If you only have a few, they're gonna freeze. And you might have an exact number one day and have 5 less the next day, and that's not enough to keep them all alive during the winter, so you want to get 10 more because something's going to get them again. Just that the winter is a problem with few chickens. The manure doesn't build up that much at all if you have space. you know, we're lucky, we have a lot of space. So I think that does matter considerably.
Thank you. We'll consider that, yeah. Yes.
Hi, Jenny Tebow, Plymouth resident. I'm over on Reservoir. The other question I have for you, in addition to number of chickens, because it's called chicken math. When you get a chicken, then you get a few more chickens. And would be grandfathering. Are you saying that somebody who, for example, has 24 chickens, would have to immediately get rid of 14 of their chickens when they're all individually named because you're really a retirement home and they're all going to die in a few years anyways, which is some people's cases, because that's not that I'm saying I personally have 24 chickens, but I get my chickens because people have 3 chickens and they don't want them anymore, and they're 5, and that's how I started. And let's say that somebody who was in that situation had a rooster and none of their neighbors complained. Is that also a problem? Is there any sort of grandfather exception to that?
It's partially an enforcement issue as well,
Yeah.
where things get a little bit more complicated and wishy-washy at times.
Technically, chickens aren't allowed in the single family at all currently.
That's
so,
why I was saying I don't know
if,
that
if we have a rule that allows them and
Nobody
it's
who drives by
enforced
my
as well
house,
as our
they
current
can't
rule
see
is
them.
enforced,
would have no
it
idea
wouldn't
they're
matter.
there. Yeah.
I mean, this does mean if it becomes a problem, we have some kind of metric. And as Phil was saying, I mean, currently it's not even allowed at all.
Right, yes. Well, I will also say that, not that it was proven to me, somebody said, oh, anybody in Plymouth can have them. You don't have to be in a agricultural, it's in all districts, which I obviously did not research. I would be more than happy to register you know what I mean? Like, while I'm on the grandfathered list, like register them until I get down to my number. But that's just something to think about, because it then becomes a big deal for people who are not a problem to their neighbors. I have an incredibly large yard that is fenced in for my chickens, and there is not a smell issue, and there are no complaints. So for some people, it's not an issue. And the grandfathering concept, if there's a change, is something I would be also interested
I
in.
think you should go to the clerk's office and get 24 dog tags. You say they're dogs.
Other breeds. I mean, what we're trying to deal with
Is
is.
this meeting going
Thank
too long?
Sorry.
We're dealing with essentially a noise issue and maybe some smell issues.
And the rooster part gets rid of a significant part of the noise
Yes.
issue.
In the north.
20 feet from your bedroom.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing I'm a little concerned about is the hen houses and fenced areas required. The way it's written seems to imply that they would be required to be and secured at all times. I think it's actually good for them to have some free reign. And like, they generally don't wander too far. They eat bugs out of the yard. I think if we can find a way to write this, that they should primarily be protected. But you know, I'm used to driving down our Maple Street and having to slow down for the chickens that are wandering home from the neighbor's yard, and that never bothers me.
I mean,
I suppose if nobody complains, then, but,
I've had to pay for chickens that wandered into my yard and
Got eaten?
met one of my dogs. But,
Sorry.
yeah,
How much did the chicken cost?
I think it was a gift certificate to a local business, so it might have been a very expensive $50 chicken.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think there's another
They were
comment.
selling them for
We're having a
like
discussion.
25
Oh.
cents.
Yeah, I know.
Mumford
Yes.
again, I just forgot to mention that guinea hens are better at getting rid of ticks
But
than
they are
chickens. That's pretty well done.
yes, and guinea hens came up in our conversation last time, and I think the consensus was for the neighbors, they would not be as,
I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah,
In medical literature.
yeah,
they're great for that, but they're loud and
yeah,
Are they?
they like to wander and disappear.
yeah. All right, well, thank you all for your comments and insights into this issue, and, I think addressing this and making chickens more viable in single-family residential is a good idea, and there might be some details to work out that as we get feedback.
Yeah.
I think the point is not trying to eliminate existing nonconformity. So, but it's, you know, trying
Unless
to,
it's a nuisance.
well, but trying to make sure that we can eliminate the nuisance without taking away what
Yeah.
people are doing. Sorry, that sounds so, I'm not
Can I say one other thing?
Sure, one more comment.
Is there any way that you can put in there for breeding? 'Cause sometimes they like to breed and get more.
I think we might be getting outside of what we probably are envisioning for single-family residential at that point.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we'll eliminate some of that when we're, not allowing for male.
Yeah.
Breed 'em.
If
So-
we eliminate the rooster
Yeah.
and we let them have their
My basic
chickens, I think
understanding
we're.
that might eliminate
There
the
could be some
breeding, but-
interesting genetic mutations, but, yeah.
There may be areas in the single-family zone that one could keep males, but, I think that
I think by default
it's
saying,
easier moving
Yeah.
forward. The proposal we have is really just
Bottom line
hens
is,
only in the
yeah,
single-family.
our interpretation is that they're not allowed now, so we're trying to find a moderate way to allow people to have.
making it a little bit easier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right,
Well, and
no,
it
I
gives,
agree.
speaking of chickens, this has been a common, we actually scaled back some of the requirements from other communities that we looked at in terms of
Yeah.
setbacks and, and it's fair to have some kind of enclosure just for safety of the animals too and protection from weather and
I think
all
people do that
so-
at night, but sometimes during the day, they like to let them
Yeah, and again,
forage too.
the town does not have the capacity to, we have a part-time code enforcement officer.
What
So
this-
they have to prioritize, the other violations in town. But when we've had a lot of complaints regarding roosters, we're trying to find a way of really addressing that as much as anything. Whether somebody's got 10 or 11, only if it's a problem will we
Yeah.
sort of send
That
the.
become an enforcement issue, right?
But what it gives
So
is
let's
the-
be practical about it and, kind of,
Yeah.
in the interest of time, sort of move on, I
Yes,
guess. To
thank
sort
you.
of find something that's like a moderate ground. That's what we felt, based on our research, that it was in the last discussion, that this was a good way to go.
I think we started with 5 and we upped it to 10.
Yeah,
And it seemed
and-
reasonable.
Right.
So
As
this gives the
simple as
enforcement
possible.
This
Pardon?
gives the
Keep it as
enforcement.
simple as possible.
Exactly, then we could cut back on some of the
This
other.
is just, yeah.
And if someone has 12 and no one notices,
What's the big deal?
But this gives the code enforcement officer something to lean on that's
Yep.
clear and
Yes.
concise, and any extra chickens that are problems can go to any
I don't think we actually,
chicken sanctuaries.
we didn't give this final version
Pantry.
to Scott, so we will do that next week and ask for his opinion on it too, so. See how enforceable he feels it is and get his okay with it. But, so are you guys okay with, as long as Scott's okay with it, and then we can
yeah, so far, I think.
work it into the warrant and the public
Yeah.
hearing time
Yeah.
and, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the public hearing.
I'm looking at the list here. There's the variance criteria and the multiple buildings per lot. I know we were talking about multiple buildings per lot and wondering if that was, are there any comments from staff about multiple buildings per lot? And the conflicting language in our ordinance, or is that something for another night?
Sorry, I was writing myself a note.
There was the whole issue of like the commercial co-location and the
We gave up on that one for tonight.
Yeah,
We
okay.
didn't. Sorry, that got me
I thought that might be the, like, yeah, I kind of assumed that, but
We might just
checking.
stop, we realize that some of the real issues with that are residential, so we probably should address that in a year or so with the house, if we get the housing
The HOP grant.
HOP grant.
Yeah.
We will include that as part of that review, to look at how many dwellings you could have and by special exception, that sort of thing. It's just a little messy in the ordinance, but it's not something it's come up a couple times around commercial structures. I think we can somebody may have to get a couple special exceptions. That's just the way it is, and it's happened before, so it's not a real pressing a need. So I think we're gonna drop,
Yeah,
our
okay.
recommendation would be to sort of back off on that one until we get the HOP thing going, housing study,
And we are moving forward in that. It's a separate issue, but.
trying to. Busy day. So the other one was the update to the variance criteria. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, is there anything to say there at this point, or?
Yeah, I don't think there's much. It's just, there was a question last time about what was dropped from the criteria for hardship. And, we have gone back, double checked, so what you have is accurate to what is written in the state statute. So, it's kind of when they changed it or why, that would take a little bit of research, but this is what in the current under the current language and the statutes surrounding variances, which we did add at the board's recommendation, a specific reference to the statute at hand. But other than that, this is the same as what the board saw last time. A couple of minor tweaks and just making sure the wording matches the statute.
All right, thank you. Are there any further comments about any of the zoning amendments? I think we've gone through them all at this point. Okay, well, thank you all for all the work on the rewrites and thinking through all the complications that come up with implementation. Are there other updates from staff?
Yeah, one we have is everyone has a flyer in front of them or at the front of the table, and we put a couple out for the public too. So some months back, the town was awarded a grant from Department of Environmental Services to create a stormwater asset management program. This is a great, a great step towards managing our stormwater infrastructure. We have 1,000+ catch basins, 25+ miles of stormwater pipes and culverts, and having a sort of comprehensive system to manage, maintain, repair, replace, just keep it working well is really important. So we got this grant. We're contracting with DPC Engineering. And the first sort of big step with this is there's going to be a public meeting. So a representative from the engineering firm is going to be present here at the planning board meeting to give an overview to not only the board, but to the public. And we're going to try to heavily, encourage everyone to attend and reach out, encourage their friends to attend and everything like that. We really think it's vital to have the community there because they'll not only get an understanding of how the town stormwater system does and should operate, but also give them an opportunity to sort of shape the vision of how we can continue to invest in it into the future and make it, something that's going to last a while. And these recommendations are really kind of important, getting the vision, establishing goals and whatnot. So it's both an educational and an opportunity for the public to sort of help shape it as well for the next step. So if you want to distribute the flyers, we can provide them to people. But we think it's a great opportunity for the public, and also it's going to be a really good program for the town once we get it up and running. If there's any questions or thoughts or.
Thank you. Anything else?
Another
updates?
Update from staff we can give is that we haven't spoken to this board quite so much about it, but we were awarded some funding for the culvert flood risk assistance grant, which we applied to, also from New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. So this was the Loon Lake culvert replacement project. We applied for that. There's 34 towns applied for $1 million in funding. It was quite limited, but we were given a partial award of $52,000 or so, which is enough to cover no match required the design, engineering, and construction inspection. So it at very least gives us a shovel-ready project, which is a good thing. And then if we can find an alternative source of funding for the project, that's great too, because this we'll have all the documents in hand ready to bid, and we'll also have the money to pay for construction inspection. This has been a identified need. It's in the master plan. It's in the hazard mitigation plan. So this culvert replacement is it's sorely needed, and this is a good step towards making something happen on that anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's also on the bottom of the CIP, 325,000 or 324,000 with a PV array.
So that is all for updates, yes?
Anything I
Okay.
missed?
Are there any other comments from the public? No? Okay. Yes.
Jenny Thibault, resident of Plymouth. The only thing I want to say, I'm not usually a planning board viewer, but it was very hard to find out information that the chicken conversation was even happening. It was just mentioned to me as a known chicken lover. But because, just to keep that in mind, because even in tonight's agenda, which I found, it just said that it was a review of the
Proposed,
zoning,
yeah.
whatever, but last meeting's minutes weren't available on the website yet. So like, I couldn't read anything about what you guys talked about.
Okay.
So just something to keep in mind when you, especially and I know that you were saying that there's gonna be a lot that you talk about in the future. It's not, this is just discussion about wording and all that sort of stuff. But just something to keep in mind, because as you know nationally, lots of things are important today, but as you know nationally, chicken keeping is a very hot and well-loved topic.
Yes.
So, just something to keep in mind and how you get information out, because it was really
yeah.
hard. And I read a lot of minutes, just to see if I could find the information. And I'm like looking for the word chicken, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So, just something to keep in mind.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
We will be having official
Hearing.
public hearings about anything we do decide to push forward to a vote in the spring, and that would probably be in December and January. And those will definitely be better publicized in terms of trying to bring people in.
I guess the only thing I would add is that, just so that people know, like, this board meets pretty much every other week. I mean, sometimes there's an extra week in the
First and third Thursdays.
Yes.
first and third Thursday. So that often is every other week. We get the agenda out on the Friday before the meeting, so we don't all, by the time we set the agenda, we don't, like Joseph and I actually, the agenda went out, was set on Friday, and we did a lot of work on this stuff Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right up until 5:30 or so today. So sometimes we don't know if we're gonna get to the chickens or not, so.
I was a comment about the minutes, not the
Yeah,
agenda.
the minutes, the agenda was general.
Yep.
Which would make sense.
And then the,
Minutes. And I totally understand, because I've dealt with the select board. It's just something to think about, but where I know that you were saying this was just sort of like the preliminary chat. but
Yes.
Just something to keep in mind.
Select boards.
Okay.
and
Thank
again,
you.
the minutes get approved tonight for the last meeting, so then we put it up there, so.
Yeah.
Something you can't get around. I respect that.
Maybe you could give some help.
I'll try to
Okay.
make excuses for us, but
Are there any other public comments?
You don't post the draft minutes?
not usually.
We could.
We could. They're always available upon request if they're draft,
So you don't, okay, only on request?
but we do publish as soon as they're approved, although they're certainly available to the
Actually,
public
I
even in
think they're
draft.
supposed to be published within a certain time after a meeting. I think we're supposed to put the draft
They're
minutes
available
up.
to the public if somebody wants them. We haven't
Okay.
done, yeah.
We're not required to publish them within, I thought,
I-
there is it's in the
We'll
right
look
now.
into it.
There is,
Yeah,
but
I thought they had to be posted within 48 hours.
yeah, I think it might be just be
I think
available.
it's a good way for people to see what's going on or has gone on.
Well, there is also
They
the
posted draft.
the Tammy Baker, if you want to watch that whole thing, of course, the Tammy Baker TV thing.
Okay, I don't need to watch it.
So there's only so many of these very long meetings.
This is something we deal with a lot, we want public involvement, and really when we go put this, we have to statutorily put our zoning amendments before a public hearing, before they go on the warrant, so they will get, you will find the word chicken on the town website when those get posted.
And probably for 2 public hearings.
Yep. So, but it's a challenge for us to deal with, what we can do as a staff and what we can do as a board. Not an excuse, but just the reality we deal with. So, I'm glad that you're, say something really weird, but I'm glad that you made it here and, doing our best, but, yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, can I say one thing?
I'll hold my motion.
I just want to say how great it is that we're like checking things off the master plan implementation list like more rapidly than I could ever dream. So it's really, having been here from the, creation of the master plan into this moment and to actually like update our site plan regs, to get a CIP, to be addressing specific things in the zoning ordinance, it's how this is supposed to work. So, well done, everyone.
Did you have something you were?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Opposed? Okay. Meeting adjourned.
So I did just
It is
try to
8:08.
print some.